Welcome. Jamie Hernandez here, founder of Breakthrough Yoga Coaching Method, helping you bridge the gap between your spiritual practice and your business so that you can grow emotionally and financially. So if you're here live, #live, I want to hear you in the comments. And just know that it takes a couple of commenting, like maybe 10 minutes for me to actually see it. So stick with me so that I can actually have a real life conversation with you. Hey, Jocelyn, right? So if you're commenting, be patient because I won't see it right away, but I do want to have a real live workshop with you. And if you're here for the replay, #replay, because today I want to ask you a question. Have you ever felt like you've been on this healing journey for a long time, and maybe you even offer life-altering transformation, and yet there are still some things and something that is chronic, and you can't necessarily put your finger on it? So let me know in the comments if you feel that way, or if maybe one of your clients feel that way, or maybe one of your, you have a friend who's been going through something for a long time and there's something that they're not grasping. So let me know in the comments if that is you, anyone you know, or anyone of your clients, because if so, then today is the training for you, because this training is called Entering the Shadow. Okay, Entering the Shadow. And some of us might have heard of what we call the dark night of the soul. Okay, so let me know in the comments if you've ever heard of that. And so let me read what it means. The dark night of the soul is often used informally to describe an extremely difficult and painful period in your life. And here's the thing, that thing that you can't quite put my finger on it, but I've been on this healing journey for a long time, and when am I gonna sort of figure it out and find that answer? Yeah? Here's the thing. Sometimes we have a dark night of the soul, but we are too young to remember it. Sometimes we have a dark night of the soul. Lean in on this one, but we're too young to remember it. Because when we experience dark night, extremely painful, traumatic events, when we're younger, one of the natural protection mechanisms that happen in our brain is that we actually kind of categorize it and put it somewhere where we don't remember. Because imagine if you're a child and you're remembering something very traumatic, you won't be able to function, right? So it's a very kind of sophisticated thing that happens in our body, in our brain. But then what starts to happen if we don't kind of enter the shadow? So let me read entering the shadow. If we don't enter the shadow, enter that part that has not been, I don't think I put a definition, but that has not been in the light of our awareness for a long time. It still needs attention. It still needs processing that we were too young to process when we were younger. And now it's coming up because it's emerging, that chronic, maybe it's irritation, maybe it's a sense of depression, maybe it's a sense of hopelessness, maybe it's a sense of resentment, maybe it's a sense of jealousy, maybe it's a sense of doubt. There's a sense, this kind of unsettling chronic feeling, sense of anxiety. And we are doing everything we can, but yet it's still sort of there, right? And that's why I want to talk about entering the shadow and what that means, and why it's so important for us who are seeking the light, who are seeking, you're just compelled and you're on a journey to seek that harmony, right? That you just there's something within that is just not completely right. Yeah, and I kind of think that's all human beings, but some of us are more compelled to find the answer. And what happens is we kind of go on this healing journey. And there's nothing wrong with a healing journey. I think, we're all on a healing journey. But when we're on this healing journey and we're going into this place where we're trying to fix that problem, and then we go to another healing and it's still not, you feel like it's still not resolved. And then you go to another healing and you feel like, that thing that I'm feeling is still not there. Here's where sometimes what I call a healing loop. We can get into this circular pattern of staying in this healing loop, never thinking that we're healed because we continue to feel that feeling. And so here's where we misdiagnose, where we think if we're feeling the feeling, then I must not be healed. But really, the integration is, can I feel that feeling? And uncover what it's trying to show me, what needs to be seen, what needs to be heard, and what needs to be felt. Because when we feel traumatic events, we don't necessarily want to feel it. Of course we don't, right? So when we enter the shadow and we start to shine the light at our own rhythm, that's why healing journeys, they take a long time, right? We're on a healing journey, but where the kind of sometimes we heal and then we still feel a feeling, so we think we're going to heal again, and we still feel the feeling, so we think we have to heal again, and then we go on this, and we constantly go on all of these different healing modalities and strategies, and every layer that gets revealed, we sometimes are not able to actually receive what it's trying to offer. And really what it's trying to offer is, you now have a little bit more room and space to hold that part of you that was too young to remember. Now it's starting to emerge, and you have the capacity at your own measure to feel it bit by bit by bit, and slowly start to eventually collaborate with that feeling that keeps on coming up, with that part of us that keeps on coming up. So let me know in the comments if this makes sense. Okay? So when we get stuck in a healing loop and we can't move forward, what starts to happen is that we understand things on an intellectual level. So when you start to do kind of deep work and maybe you do different types of therapy, you might uncover a moment in time where something felt dramatic, something felt very extremely painful. And this is often what we relate the dark night of the soul. It's like this kind of big traumatic event, and kind of brings us to our knees, and it's a difficult time and we move through it. But if we don't go to what I call the younger dark night, the one that actually is not able to remember or feel, right, in an intellectual way, and if you were to work with me, we'd actually, depending on the readiness of your experience, we'd actually be able to get to that place. Because when we get to that younger dark night, that's actually the root of it all. So sometimes we have like more dramatic experiences that we actually remember when we were younger, but when we get really down to the deeper core, what I call the core wound of it all, that's kind of the domino effect of because that core wound, the one that we actually don't remember, is really the one that attaches to everything else in our life. And we're trying to fix everything else, but it's that core wound that's still not processed. Okay, so let me know if that makes sense. Okay, so this is what Carl Jung says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And I see this where sometimes it's like that unconscious core wound that has attached to everything in your life, because you feel like, oh, I've done all these trainings and then it just must be who I am. I must just be a depressed person. I must just be a person that can't make my life the way I want. I must just not be like that person. I'm not able, or I'm not capable. And we don't even recognize that it is the one that is directing our life, and we accept it as our fate. It's been so loud, and it's been so sort of the lens on top of everything, that we tend to just start to identify with, that's who I am, right? So this is why it's important, right, to learn how to enter the shadow of your experience, the deep roots that are so deep down that you can't even remember if you were just to think about it. Okay, there are work to bring it out, but it's like, if you were to just think simply, I was like, wow, no, I didn't have any dramatic dark night of the soul events, right? And this was a big aha moment for me, because I did, you work with all of the different stages in your life. Like I talk about, how my relationship with my family, and when I was 15 and how I hated my father and all that. And that's something you can remember. And that's, you feel like you can work with it. But the things that sort of happen when you're younger, it's like, oh, it was like this big aha moment for me, and I also with all my clients. So the analogy I talk about when you're entering what I call entering the shadow, right, is it's like a seed, okay? And this is the thing, it's like all our core wounds actually have a potential, right? A potential of our own reality. And so it's like the seed buried in the dirt. It's very dense. We can't see it. We don't even realize we're a seed because it's just so dark. We don't even realize that our seed can actually grow into this beautiful oak tree or whatever you want to think about, right? And so it's buried. But when we start to nurture and actually realize, oh, the seed is in the ground, it's there. I can't see it, but it's there. And I can't see it. I can't put my finger on it, right? The seed could be like the core wound. Can't put my finger on it. This core wound that has a potential of growth. But if I nurture it, like I till the soil, I pour water into it, I put light, shine the light on it, and I have faith that it will grow. Okay, that's a big one. I have faith that it will grow into something more than just the seed. Then what you start to see happen is like, oh, okay, you start to see the roots maybe starting to kind of grow, where you're starting to anchor yourself in your strategies and your practices, all of the healing journey. Like none of it is gone to waste. All of it is anchoring you into something that you can work with, so that it just this chronic feeling of overwhelm or depression or whatever you want to talk about, or anxiety, it doesn't completely run your life. You start to, like, in the healing journey, you start to figure out, okay, if I go exercise, if I go for a walk, if I breathe, if I join that community class, and so you start to root yourself in, like, okay, in this thing. And then all of a sudden, sometimes some things happen where it's like you're trying, and the push to the light. But it takes time. It takes time to, like, and if we were to just give up, right? Like we see the roots, if you imagine it, see the roots, and you see that actually the little seedling is actually starting to, a little baby, fragile little baby coming up, and you're like, okay, I give up. I give up. I'm gonna go till the soil somewhere else, right? That's the analogy of like going to another training and another retreat without understanding. Oh wait, I built roots. Oh wait, I'm pushing up towards the. Oh my God, I'm in this dark place, but I know I'm going somewhere. It's that faith, right? That knowing, like, actually, if I keep on nurturing it with gentle awareness, oh, one day, a little seedling will pop up, and it's like this baby, this fragile part of you that, like, okay, wait a minute. There is hope. There is another way that I can maneuver in this kind of where I felt buried in the dark, where I felt like this chronic thing that I couldn't touch or see or feel is starting very subtly to grow. And what I talk about is like, it's like this subtle aroma. When you've been on this healing journey, it's just like, okay, it's just sort of like, after you've gone to a yoga and meditation class, and you're like, or whatever strategies you've learned to kind of work with your deeper rooted unconscious traumas, you find like tools, and you find like little pockets, little baby pockets of like, okay, I know this is where I can calm, right? And when I talk about the healing journey, sometimes, we'll go down a path where we're just sort of not feeling, and we're getting distracted, and maybe we go down dark rabbit holes where we get addicted to certain things. And I'm not saying that is a wrong path. I'm just saying it's sometimes it just takes you deeper into the dark, right? And then sometimes we get so caught in that dark, and we're so tired, right? The seed doesn't want to stay in the dark forever. It wants to bring itself back to the light. So eventually it will find its way. Okay? So that's the analogy of entering into the soul. Now, here's the thing. I talked about sometimes we figure it out like, okay, now I know like why I get anxious when I walk down the street. I get anxious when I'm in the same room as other people, or a particular female or male, or there are certain things that trigger that chronic feeling, right? And when we just understand, sometimes we think, when we kind of understand something, we're like, oh my God, okay, I figured it out. And when you've been on the healing journey for a long time, you can sometimes get stuck in the problem-solving reality. So of course, when you figured something out in the problem-solving reality, we're like, yes, okay, I found the answer. But guess what happens in a problem-solving reality? There's the solution, and there's the answer, but then there's always this problem. And then you go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And when we actually integrate, let's say we discover a layer of reality, or a layer of the dark night, that we're like, oh my God, that's why I feel depressed or nervous, or I have that kind of like, every time I'm around food, I have this like nervous feeling, or every time I talk to, authority figure, I have this certain feeling in my body, and I have a certain, or if I'm going to present myself to a big group of people, and you pinpoint. So if you were to work with me, we actually figure out like, what is that point where it got coded in, because that's what happens. It gets coded in, right? In your body and your mind and your energy. But here's the thing, when you just understand it, it's kind of like reading a book about flying or growing plants, but not actually going and experiencing it and making mistakes and feeling it out and starting to develop an intuition around it. So when we're younger, that's the reason why we can't remember. It's actually a somatic, energetic, and physical memory. That's why if we get things that trigger similar situations, like, so let's say you're very intimidated by an authority figure because your parents were very authoritarian. And then all of a sudden you get, like at work, you get your nervous system starts to feel a certain way. You start to sweat. There's a physical manifestation. And that's where the memory lies. That's where the imprint lies. That's why it's important. And for me, when we're entering into the shadow, is that we must, and I talk about this a lot, utilize the body temple. There's many different modalities, but first things first, we must enter the body temple. And the body temple, instead of thinking, will begin to reveal. It will begin to reveal, and it will begin to, let's say we have an anxious pattern. We don't necessarily know where it came from, but we begin to kind of give ourselves the ability to feel it. Like oftentimes when some of my clients are having an anxiety attack, what we mostly do is try to avoid it. We try to numb it out. We try to do something to distract ourselves. But I start to give them tools to be able to go down to your feet, go into your breath, start to ground in the experience and concentrate, right? Little by little sensations, and be with the feeling of it. We don't know why, but we just have this feeling of anxiety. And little by little, the body starts to like recognize it's safe. And here's the thing. You know, if you've been on this healing journey for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, that sometimes when you practice, the practice can feel brand new. Sometimes a practice feels very mundane and repetitive, and sometimes it can feel very different and new. And when we can commit, so what we call it, what I call, or what my teacher calls a devotional discipline to the practice, and we have faith. So remember that point about faith. That, okay, if we keep on nurturing it through the body, through the mind and energy, we keep on nurturing it. So I have a client, we've been working together for 10 years. 10 years. But it's like whenever we work together today, it feels like this brand new thing. But at the beginning, right, there was the feeling of that, that chronic, like, just this overall feeling of feeling down. This overall feeling of like just feeling depressed. This overall feeling of just irritable with people. But we develop this ability to be with it, right? Because at first you're just in the pattern, you don't realize it. Then you're starting to see the pattern and you're judging, and you're like, oh, this is bad. Like we start to judge it, we analyze it. And then there's this long period of observation, and we develop tools, right? We develop tools, and how do we just observe ourselves when we're in this freaking place? Because like the seed, we're going to just have to let it do its thing, right? Push its way. And what we developed together was a devotional discipline, where even though he was depressed, bored, maybe irritable, there was a continuation, that faith of continuing to come back to the practice, because there's part of him that knew it's not the full shebang, but hey, I actually can observe myself in my depression now. I don't necessarily get lost and caught, and sometimes I do. I can observe myself. Ooh, and then now it's like I do a class, and I actually like I can observe, like if I say so, like I remember saying something like feel I forgot what it was. Feel your aliveness, and his kind of pattern, his mental pattern was like, so, like, but there was an observation. And yet, even though that was coming up, he continued to practice. And this is what we do. People on the healing journey, you all know, we'll just continue, because we somehow know inside of us there's some kind of potential here. There's some kind of growth if I stay on the path. So 10 years later, here we are, right? And all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, okay, not all of a sudden, 10 years. Okay, so I'm skipping, right? So I'm going from the beginning to sort of, okay, there was the continuous seedlings, this baby kind of places where it's like very raw, and if we didn't take care of it, that little baby seedling that grew a little bit would have died, right? If you don't take care of that little baby seedling, it kind of dies. So now, 10 years later, after a devotional discipline of practicing together consistently, there's a feeling of confidence, a feeling of curiosity for life, a feeling of like, oh, I'm curious about something. Now I actually have the courage to go do it. A feeling of like, oh my God, I was there before, where it's like, just not typical, but like, I'm traveling to New York, where it's before I wouldn't even be able to afford groceries. You know what I mean? Like just these kind of like, whoa, quantum leap recognitions of where you are now. And so I guess what my point is it is this bit by bit by bit. One, entering your shadow through the body. First, you're in the pattern where maybe you're just like irritated, and there's a physical manifestation. There's a certain nervous system that goes along with it. There's a certain anxiousness or depression or repression that goes along with it. Then there's your mental, right? There's a mental pattern of just like, okay, so what the fuck? I don't care. Like, So sometimes when you're in the light and you're in the dark and somebody says something in the light, if we're still kind of deep down buried in the dark, we might not necessarily receive it. We're just like, I don't know, I can't feel that, so I don't know what you're talking about, right? Feel that. They can't feel it, so it's not. They can't reach what we're talking about. But they're like, but there's something there that I do want, so I'm going to continue. Then we start to see what happens in the mind, the patterning. And then the more we observe it, the more we can start to see how it speaks, how it talks, because there's certain parts of us, right? That part that was so young develops this voice, and because it developed in the unconscious at such a young age, you don't even realize like that's not even your voice. And the nervous system that functions from that place that is scared, that is anxious, that is depressed, is something that you weren't even aware of, right? Because something maybe happened physically, mentally, emotionally, energetically. And so this voice has it has certain words. So here's the thing, start to observe, like, what are the words that for you create these universes that bring you down a rabbit hole? Because those most likely are words that are coming from, and I have a client who, he has a very big doubter voice. We call it the doubter voice. And he'll say really kind of mean things, right? Like, you're such an idiot. Oh, like, what do you think people are going to think about you? And this is not the only person that has this. I'm just giving an example. Like, many of us on the planet have this kind of very abuser type voice, right? But it was formed so young that we actually just take it in. And guess what? It probably wasn't. It's not even our voice, right? And so it's like there's this voice that sort of like almost like, don't do that. Don't go there. That's the scary place. Like, so when the nervous system feels that feeling, it starts to, the voice is like, that's danger, right? Because in the past it was danger, right? That's danger. Don't go there, right? And we're just so used to hearing that and listening to it because it did protect us at one point. So we want to validate the fact that it did protect us at one point. But now, again, as Carl Jung says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Oh, my life is just so hard. Oh my God, yeah, you know, I'm just not like those people where they can do that. Oh, right? I'm not good enough. And so we slowly start to see the patterning in the mind. And then we start to see it energetically. So if I go back to my beautiful client who's doing the work and he's on the path and he's on that faith path, we start to realize, wow, the energy of that doubter voice comes literally like, almost like this big, like overcasting shadow, taming his light from here. Like we literally saw it. So I was talking to him about his projects and the things that he loves. And literally you could see him going like this, because the energy was felt so big, because probably when he received that, he was really small, right? So it's still that stagnant energy in the field, right, that is coming in. And again, it's like it's just there and we didn't even realize. So when we enter the shadow, if you were to work with me and you were one of my clients, we enter it through the physical body. How does it physically manifest? And how can we make room? So the other day I was working with my client who was feeling more confident, more curious, more like proud of his transformation. We were feeling that in the body. Because here's the thing, when you're healing and you get so used to feeling the depression and the pain and all that, and we get good at that. But we kind of forget there are other feelings that have not been given much light or expansion or feeling. So we were expanding into confidence. We were feeling what that feels like. We were doing physical manifestations of how that would be in our posture, in our movement, and all his body finding it out. I didn't even look really at what he was doing. I kind of was checking out just to really see if he was resonating with the practice, but his expression was his expression, right? And it's like it's finding that expression, because maybe the expression looks like this, but that, like, you ever see babies they learn how to say hi, and it's like you don't even realize they're saying hi, and then all of a sudden they're like, right? That's the same thing, right? When we're expanding in something that hasn't had the light shine on it for a long time and is blossoming, we kind of have to like explore how it's expressing itself and give it more room and expansion. Okay? And then the mental patterning, we have to really discern between the anxious voice, the doubter voice. Like I have another client who the overall arching voice is, you're not working hard enough. So everything that comes out of that voice, okay, yeah, I was trying this exercise, but I didn't do enough of the lines. You gave me 10 lines, I only did 5. Oh, I was doing the other exercise, and I was doing this work and this website, and I didn't actually, is like, and I didn't spend enough time with it. It's always this kind of like this overarching kind of different sentences, but they all are basically saying you're not working hard enough, right? And that's the thing. Sometimes it's like this overarching sentence that sounds like so many different things, and this is where it gets a little tricky, where the intellect will make it sound like it's figured something out. Where it's like, yeah, no. If I just do kind of more mantras, if I just do more healing, if I just figure out how to, speak in a way that I sound more confident, if I find that perfect program that I actually can sell with like integrity, it sounds very like savvy, and you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense, right? And you've been listening to it for so long, it just becomes more and more sophisticated in the way it tells you the same message. Okay? The same message is, whatever. If the message is like, what you're an idiot. Everything it says is going to be similar to that. So all of a sudden they're going to devise, based on a problem-solving reality, some kind of solution to solve that problem. So the other side of problem solving reality is creation. So when you're a kid, you start to, you know how you kind of have these ideas and you just go with it, right? So in our life, our soul, as we start to blossom, we're like, ooh, I think my soul wants to go travel to this place. Ooh, I think my soul wants to have more music in my life. And you start to see the blossoming. So the symptoms of when it starts to become integrated, you actually move from thinking about it and dreaming about the thing that you would just be your ultimate joy. And it's kind of scary, but you're going to do it anyway. You actually start to do it. Even if it's small things, right? If it's speaking in front of the public, maybe you envision yourself in front of 100 people, but you start with your sister. And then you start with like a group of people that you're comfortable with. And then you start with like that group that you hold on a weekly basis. And you see it, and it goes on like that, right? So bit by bit. So the layer of creativity is like, how can I do this part, what I envision? Maybe there's this big vision, but how can I kind of just do one step that looks like that, right? So I want to travel, but I haven't left my house for 10 days. Maybe I'm going to go travel by myself, to the other side of town. Maybe I'm going to just take a little short car road trip to like a town 1 hour away. And then maybe, okay, I'll take a plane that's 3 hours away. Do you see what I'm saying? So for our clients, they're always looking at this end result of like, okay, I want, they see their vision, and then they kind of like, they expect, the vision to just like happen tomorrow. But it's like, we always work, and our clients and I always work on like, well, what's the next obvious action? That is not, let me do this to get to that. So example, like, okay, I want to make more money, right? So I know this is almost too simple for your ears to hear, but so charge more. Now it's a little bit more deeper than that. We go into really what's your clarity, what is your deeper truth, what do you want to align with. But like, let's just say you're charging $80. Okay, so charge $100, right? Oh, but then I'm going to do a website, and then I'm going to do like, go on social media every day. And then, instead of just going to do that thing, right? So again, we work our way up, but sometimes the next obvious action is something that puts us out of our comfort zone. So it's our growth edge, right? But we just practice doing that. Does that make sense? You choose something that is kind of scary, but is like, okay, if I say like, let's do the money example. Okay, I'm going to charge $200 an hour, but you're like, I can't even handle that. But like, okay, but what if you, instead of $80, charge $100? And then work your way up to 200. And then with our clients, I teach them how to actually charge at a premium, which is more in the $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $10,000, up to whatever it is. Because we start to really hone in on what is our expertise, what is our life-altering transformation. How can we work in the spiritual house to work with our own SHIT so that we can move and bring the energy out of that stagnant stuckness into action of where they want to go. Okay? And so there's all, the mind is it loves to be very complex. And that's why it's important to work in the body, because the body doesn't need to think. But we still need to see how the mind speaks and discern between that part in us and that part that is more speaking from our soul, right? So just to give you an example, it's like one of my clients, like, he has a doubter voice, and I asked him, well, you know that kind of fatherly voice that comes in and speaks? Let's give him more room. What would he say, right? And let's omit all the words that come out of the doubter voice. So let's start to do some spring cleaning, right? The doubter voice likes hard. It likes you must. It likes, like you're an idiot. Like, we got to delete those, right? That's just one exercise. But we need to discern that voice because the creative voice is like, it gets really excited and it gets really into the creation of where this is going. And this is what we have to understand. When you're creating something, it's not just bam, all of a sudden it's there. You did the healing work and I talked about this last week, the power of prayer. Like, it first starts in a deep prayer. It starts with clarity. It starts with practice, observation, and listening. Right? So there's a deeper practice to our physical 3D manifestations of our life and our business. Okay, so there's that deeper work that we practice. And then there's the energy, right? So we start to see like where the energy kind of comes in, but also what energy are we expanding into, right? So again, we don't want to just see the dark shadow. We have to see, well, what is it now that we also can open into the light about? Yeah? Okay, so I hope all of this is making sense. Let me know if you have any big takeaways from this, if you relate to any of this. But let me just recap, okay? The very first thing we talked about is, well, there's many things, but one of the things we started talking about is having that dark night of the soul. It's like that big traumatic event that you may or may not remember. Some points you remember, and then here's where a lot of us get stuck. It's when we were so young, the traumatic event happened that we actually don't remember. And that's where the deep work that we do when we go into the body and we look at the mind and we look at the energy, which is deep, but it's not complex. I always say deep never has to be complex. So it's not complex like the mind might like to think about it, okay? It's still work, but it's not complicated. And again, if we stay on that path, right, then we eventually get to where we're going. So that whole analogy, that's what we talked about. Okay, so it's important now to enter the shadow, because we can't go into the light. We can't like all of a sudden not have that seed buried in the dirt and all of a sudden it like sprouts up into a flower. No, it kind of has to be there. And we have to nurture it. And we have to give it water. And we have to let the light shine on it. And actually in my work, we actually work with the 5 elements to actually break down the rigidity and the literal stuckness that happens when you physically go through something emotionally traumatic or physically traumatic. It literally gets stuck somewhere in the body. So we start to thaw that out, right? And it starts to reveal itself bit by bit, and you start to be able to work with it bit by bit, right? And then we talked about how do we enter the shadow, right? We talked about through the body, through the many layers of the mind, right? Where eventually we start discern between the voice, but then we start to become friends with that part of us, and we start to collaborate with that part of us and bring it along the journey. And then we start to have the other voice that has the higher potential, the creativity, the one that is really connected to your soul, have that take up more room so that it can reparent that part in us that never heard or learned or was even conscious of what it feels like to be seen, heard, and felt. And then we talked about how it literally energetically gets stuck, and it came through a certain energetic part in your somatic field. And then how can we expand into what it is we want? We always have to go into the shadow, work with it, right? See how it's manifested physically, mentally, and energetically. But we also then have to choose, well then, but what are we creating? What are we expanding into? What are we growing into? What is the potential of this? And can I have faith to know that this seed is going to grow into a big oak tree? And we all know big oak trees take many, many many, many lifetimes of growth. And as a human, this is why it's important to enter the shadow, because sometimes you can experience quantum leaps in your human life when you go deeper into that shadow, into that core wound. And that was the thing that we talked about, the core wound that kind of attaches to everything. And it's so present that we don't even realize that we speak through that all the time, and we feel through that all the time. Okay, so anything else that I forgot to say? Let's see. I mean, I think we said a lot. And I guess the last thing I want to say is the faith piece. Is that understanding where we don't receive the layer that has been revealed. The reason why things emerge, like sometimes when we're doing shadow work and the shadow is even louder and stronger and pulls you down into this big rabbit hole, is because it's sort of like resisting, it's fighting its way because it wants to survive. So instead of trying to kill it and beat it down and resist it and not hear it, we actually have to take it and bring it into the light. And start to give it what it needs. And start to let it know, that part of us, that it's safe now. And start to choose a different body, a different nervous system, a different mind, a different energy than the one that it got created because it needed to protect. So I guess the final point is, if we understand and we watch nature, and we know if a seed gets planted in the deep darkness, it will develop roots. It will find its way to the light, even though sometimes that journey feels like a long time. It will have its baby like moments of, oh my God, there's these aha kind of moments, until it can kind of stand on its own and it just becomes this beautiful blossoming, whatever it is for you, whatever analogy you want to think of, a rose bush or flower or vegetable or oak tree or pine tree, whatever it is, it will eventually grow into that. And so it takes that devotional discipline, it takes that practice. And so each layer, don't discount or start to be willing to receive, oh wow, I can be with that anxious feeling for 10 seconds. 1 year later, ooh, I can like be around people that kind of trigger that feeling for like 30 minutes. Ooh, when I'm by myself, I actually, instead of distracting myself or going into my vice or whatever it is, I actually can be with that feeling. Ooh, now I can actually speak about it to other people, because I'm less, it brings me down less. Right? So we have to start to receive the integration that happens as we grow. Right? And it's, I think I talked about this last week. I'll give you this last example, because maybe it's more concrete for you. I have a friend, she was telling me about how she was praying and she was calling in, that one that sees her, that they get along, that they can laugh together, that they can have these deep conversations. Okay? She prayed for them. And lo and behold, she meets somebody and they go on this like amazing 6-hour car drive that feels like 15 minutes because they were so much in the vibe. And then she's like, oh, let's be boyfriend and girlfriend. And then he was like, whoa, like, no. And then all of a sudden she was like, oh my God, okay. See, no, I don't get what I want. This is not working. I finally find the love of my life and he doesn't want to be with me. Whoa. And we forget to actually integrate and receive, you have manifested someone in your life who sees you and hears you and can vibe with you, and he's not gone. He wants to be friends. So can you receive that part of the journey? Because I talked about this a lot last week. Our prayers are never going to be given to us, very rarely. Sometimes they do, and sometimes they're just given to you in a way that you don't expect. And so if it doesn't meet our expectations, all of a sudden that voice, the doubter voice, the anxious voice, whatever you want to call, however it shows up, starts to like, you see, this is not real, because it's not even used to expanding into, oh my God, I could hang out with somebody who sees me, feels me. Oh, we could be friends. Wow. So it's just like you got so used to being in the other mind, body, energy that you're not able to receive what you've been praying for this whole time. So that's the same in our healing journey. Sometimes there is the prayer that has been answered, but you got so used to being in the dark that you sometimes forget, oh, you're allowed to play in the light, and it's safe there. Okay, so that's the last thing. I ended with this last week because I think that's where most of us healers get stuck. We get so used to being in the dark, we don't let the pleasure, the whatever emerges out of our devotional practice, we don't expand into it. And we don't give ourselves permission, or we don't allow it to continue to be nurtured. Because we think we have to nurture the dark so much. Yes, okay. But sometimes that victim or whatever just needs to like sit down, take a break while you have fun. Does it make sense? So I hope this was helpful. Entering the shadow, let me know your biggest takeaways, and let me know if any of this resonates with you, because this is the type of work I do with all my clients who are practicing a practice, living a life that they've been trying, especially when they have a spiritual practice that they're trying to align with their business, but it's not going in the way that we want to go. We do this deep work, and then we get into the practical of marketing, then we get into the practical of making money, then we get into the practical of building our business house. Because that's the work that needed for healers before they move on. They need to have that kind of language. That's what we speak as empaths and sensitives and healers. So if that type of work resonates with you and you're in a place where you feel stuck in your life and your business, then DM me and let me know, Jamie, I'm ready for a breakthrough yoga coaching call. And together we're going to look at, on the call, I'm going to send you an application, and I'm going to first see where I feel like, oh, where are you stuck? And then if you pass it, like if it seems like it's the right kind of thing to work with, right? Then we get on a call, and on that call we look at the physical, mental, and energy body and see where it's actually been imprinted, because that's the first step, right? Once we get to that core wound, that's the first step to moving forward. Okay, so DM me, let me know, Jamie, I'm ready for a breakthrough yoga coaching call, and I'll be happy to send you an application and answer all your questions. So if you have any questions, let me know, and otherwise I will see you next week, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Bye, guys. Thanks.